that Nico almost held out of the playoff game, the playoffs. And he said he wasn't the only one. So that's the era we're kind of, by the way, could you imagine those poor Tennessee fans had they driven all the way up from Tennessee to Neyland North and Nico doesn't play? They might have gotten humiliated and had to leave in the third quarter with their tail between their legs. I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships. The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. Hey, welcome to Juck on Bucks on a Tuesday. Appreciate you all so much for joining me. We got a big show to get to today. Our buddy Dillon Davis will join us at some point when I'm done rambling here with my opening segment. I get on these little kicks where it's always a history topic, but I'll get on a history topic and I'll dive in and just kind of go overboard and just consume everything I can about this one particular topic. Like recently it was Captain Cook, the golden age of sail, the exploration of the Pacific Islands, the Polynesian people, first contact. I just went all in on that. And now I've kind of switched to maritime disasters. And I find these things fascinating. There's a channel I found called Ocean Line Designs. And the guy that hosts it says when he does his intro, "I'm your friend Mike Brady." And I just love the way he calls us his friend when we're watching. And I thought that I might borrow it. Welcome to Juck on Bucks. I'm your friend Juck. Does it work? I don't know. But at least I gave Mike Brady credit, which is more that I can say for the Juckeye least favorite broadcaster of the week who called the spring game for Ohio State. That's Jake Butt. You guys know Jake. Jake Butt grew up 20 minutes down the street from Ohio State, decided to go to Michigan, and in recent years has really kind of become it's not a very high bar to climb, but everybody's favorite Michigan broadcaster, because when we're talking about Desmond Howard, Charles Woodson, guys that they've got on their side of things, they're very biased, and they don't hide it. They don't try to be even Steven. They don't try to be fair. Jake does, and I'll give him credit for that. But last week we had Dillon Davis from the Delaware Gazette on with us, and Dillon told us he was very happy. He got a phone call from Jake Butt, and he got to talk to Jake Butt about the Buckeyes. And it wasn't a 20-minute conversation. They talked for an hour and a half, and Dillon told him everything. Jake didn't know anything. He gave him the lowdown on every single position group, all the narratives that people like you and I talk about on a daily basis. He gave it all to him. And if you listened to Jake Butt in that broadcast, he sounded like we were talking to Dillon. It was Dillon's words coming out of Jake Butt's mouth on that broadcast. And do you think he could have taken 20 seconds out of that diatribe to say, "I was talking to Ohio State reporter Dillon Davis, and he told me," no, not once, not a single plug for our guy who took out an hour and a half of his evening he could have been spending with his wife or here on Juck on Bucks to give him a shout out. So Jake Butt at the bottom, which is saying a lot after I just heard what Joel Klatt had to say today. Joel Klatt, he of Big Noon Kickoff fame, who we have to listen to constantly. Joel Klatt weighed in on the Nico Iamaleava thing. Now, the thing about Joel Klatt weighing in on this is he's coming at this from a perspective. He has built for himself kind of this stance that we are, as a matter of fact, it's the lead into his show. We are now entering the golden era of college football, is what Joel Klatt likes to say. Now, I disagree. I think that we have a much more fun postseason in college football. Everything else is nowhere near as good as it used to be when I was younger. You've lost a ton of the things that actually made me gravitate towards the sport. I don't know that I would love it as much now if I was growing up in this era of college football. Seems a whole lot like the NFL to me. But that's the stance he's coming at this with. So when you hear people talk about this Nico situation, like I did the other day, and basically what I said was, number one, it's poetic justice for Tennessee, who went after Nico, paid him $8 million, way overpaid him, and by doing so, reset the quarterback market so everybody else has to pay these astronomical prices. Number two, the NCAA was investigating them over the Nico deal, and the Attorney General of Tennessee took the NCAA to court, wins, and that's what sparks off the NCAA washing their hands of trying to enforce any of this stuff. So the lawlessness that we're currently living in, that's Tennessee's fault. And the fact that after 2 years of paying this kid a total of $4.4 million, this year, year 3, this is their payoff year, that this kid is now not going to be there with them, is poetic justice at its finest. I think it's hilarious that it happened to Tennessee. However, Tennessee did the right thing. Did the right thing by calling his bluff and go ahead, get out. If you're not going to come to practice, whatever, get out. Or however it went down, because some people are saying now that Nico was gone and he didn't come to practice because he was done. Whatever way it went down, Tennessee wasn't going to cave. They weren't going to pay the money. So Joel Klatt had this to say about it.
Going to land, and it's going to be a story that is driven by this narrative that Nico was greedy, he wanted more money. Tennessee is the heroes in the story, and they said no, and we're just going to go from here.
Nobody is calling Tennessee a hero, but everybody is patting him on the back for doing the right thing, because their decision to not cave to him let's put it this way, had they caved, it just might have reverberated across college football in a way that none of us would have liked to see. Guys strong-arming their teams. And we found out last night from Josh Pate that Nico almost held out of the playoff game, the playoffs. And he said he wasn't the only one. So that's the era we're kind of, by the way, could you imagine those poor Tennessee fans, had they driven all the way up from Tennessee to Neyland North and Nico doesn't play? They might have gotten humiliated and had to leave in the third quarter with their tail between their legs. But Joel Klatt wants to defend Nico in this situation, and he goes further with this.
When in actuality, like, one, this is totally within Nico's rights because there are no rules. And he held his ground as well, which tells you that it's not just about money, that there's more at play.
Absolutely not. I don't know how you deduce that tells us that. Now, could there have been something more at play? Sure. Does it tell us that by the actions of the Iamaleavas? No, it doesn't tell us that at all. It tells us that they wanted more money. We know that for sure. And you might have been able to sell this. You might have been able to sell that there was something else going on had these folks not tried to sit out of a playoff game. And then when this just broke this week, called the reporter that broke it up and said he was lying and it was fake news. You might have been able to sell it if that wasn't the case. Now, Nico's going to get everything that's coming to him. Number one, coaches don't want him. He looks like a horrible teammate, and they don't want to deal with his dad and him, who's clear. I mean, he seems to be a pawn in his dad's game here, which is unfortunate. However, I know that if I told any one of my kids who are Nico's age that they are leaving their job, moving across the country because they only make $20 an hour and I want them to make 30 over here, they would laugh at me. Regardless, Nico didn't say that to his dad, so we have to assume he's going along with it, right? So that's it. Now, he's a grown man. I got no problem calling him out for his actions. There's some people walking, kind of skirting around that because the dad's the mouthpiece here. This is just as much on the kid, man. He's going to go wherever he's going to go, hopefully. And I really hope that he gets less money than he's getting at Tennessee, because that's what he deserves. Less money. He didn't deserve the $2.4 million, and he's just basing this off of, look, they're talking about $4 million, which is just absurd. The guy has incredible arm talent, but he hasn't shown anything yet. This was the year. This was why they invested the money. I can't wait to see what happens with this. I cannot wait. But it's all good news. It's all good stuff. And Joel Klatt, with his golden era of college football, it is a golden era. Golden era maybe to be a Buckeye fan. Not the golden era of college football. Though the postseason, a whole lot of fun. I'll give him that. And for starters, I'm not sure if I said this one on my members show, on the live stream we did last week, or on the regular show. So I'll say it again, because I pat myself on the back when I'm right. I put myself big out on this one with Evan Goodwin, and I was wrong. I did not get this one at all. Arkansas lineman Tyler Bowen's first offer came up to visit quickly. I talked to him, and man, this kid was super impressed and flattered that the national championship winning head coach sat him down for a one-on-one talk and made him feel like he was a dude that they wanted. And he was reshuffling his entire board. Now, we're not talking about Ohio State was his only big offer. Dude had 4 blue bloods after him with Notre Dame, USC, and Oklahoma, including Ohio State. And he just recently cut his Final Four. And that Final Four is Missouri, Oklahoma State, Southern Methodist University, and Mississippi State. All right, dude. I don't know what to tell you. Now, some people have speculated that because of a flood they just had that did damage to his hometown, maybe he wants to stay closer to home. I asked him about that when I first talked to him, and he said, I'm going to be going to school and playing football, so distance isn't going to matter. I couldn't see my family anyway. Now, those are 4 border states, so maybe it is a bigger issue than he thought it would be. Who knows? But those aren't schools that are equivalent of the 4 blue bloods that were after him. So it's just strange. Hey, whatever. Ton of great linemen on the Buckeyes board, ton of great relationships. And one great relationship just happens to be with the guy that we haven't really discussed much, but PJ Dean, who is a stud out of the state of North Carolina, who just got himself a crystal ball after visiting to Ohio State from a Rivals reporter. And that was interesting news because I didn't realize that there was so much movement going on with PJ Dean. So definitely a name to watch here as we move throughout the cycle. Now, Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 offensive lineman in the country, the number 1 player in the country, according to some services, has narrowed it down to his Final Four. And it is really cool that the Buckeyes are in this Final Four because I think it tells us a couple of things. In the Final Four with Miami, Georgia, Oregon, and the Bucks. So you've got your 2 mainstays for the best player in the country or the best 5 players in the country. You know, you're going to have Ohio State and you're going to have Georgia on all those lists. And then you got your 2 big payers, Oregon and Miami. But the reason I think it's interesting that the Bucks are on there still, number 1, Michigan's not on there. And Michigan had been trending a little bit with him. When he came up to visit Ohio State both times, he also took a trip to Michigan. So he cuts them off the list. Now, Michigan is big in on the pay. They're big in on paying right now. They've stepped it up big time with their sugar daddy, and they're paying everybody big bucks, which is why I thought they were a real player in that contest for Cantwell. But the fact that they're no longer there and Ohio State is, I think tells us that he might not be just going to the highest bidder, might not be concerned about resetting the market, knows he's going to get paid good, and he will at Ohio State. But Ohio State is not going to match or meet Oregon or Miami's offer, nor will Georgia, to be honest. So, Georgia and Ohio State can play these things a little bit differently. They've got a little bit more to show what they can do for someone than Oregon and Miami. No offense, Duckeyes. They just do. So I think it's pretty interesting. They're in his Final Four, and he's got a decision date, which is, I think, is it at the end of April? Hang on. Yes, it is. April 30th. So just a couple weeks out from Jackson Cantwell's decision. Now, again, ultimately, don't think he ends up a Buckeye. But the fact that Tyler Bowen was able to get in there to the Final Four, and who knows, maybe he's closer to the Final Two. I think it says a whole lot about what he is and who he is, but he's already shown us that already, which, by the way, Maxwell Riley, Sam Greer, and Tucker Smith were all in town for the spring game. I talked to Maxwell. He loved it. He loved hanging with those dudes for the first time the 3 of them got to hang together. So that's awesome. Larry Johnson offered J.J. Perez. J.J. Perez is a monster defensive tackle. Matter of fact, let's watch a little of his film. A monster defensive tackle out of Glenville. Not a highly rated guy, rated like the number 1,200th player in the country, a 3-star kid. That's not even a high 3-star, but he is 6'4", 330 to 350 pounds, depending on where you look. And he eats up a ton of space. Looks like he loves to play football. Guys like that, you always question their motor when you're looking at highlights. You know, how hard can they get after it, play after play? He does stand up. Doesn't quite understand how to use his leverage yet. I see a lot of these little dudes kind of getting leverage on him real quick and standing him up a bit. But he certainly can get after it, and he's pretty dominant once he gets going. He's tough to stop. I don't know about you, but I love having a couple of guys like that on the roster. Just some big old dudes, and hey, if they end up developing, look out. So always nice to get a couple of those guys. We don't have any of those guys right now. We don't have any of those huge monsters like that. So I'm happy about that. Other offers that he's got, nothing like Ohio State on his list. We're talking about Wisconsin, Syracuse, West Virginia is probably the 3 biggest names on his offer list. So I talked to him. He said the Buckeyes are right up at the top with the rest of his top schools. Now, whatever that means, I don't know. But I'm going to guess the Buckeyes are at the top of his list. And if Larry really wants to push for J.J. Perez, he's going to get him, which, hey, I'm all for taking as many kids from Glenville who are worthy of an Ohio State offer as we can get. That's good because it's going to pay off in the long run to continue to keep that pipeline rolling. It always does. We know that. Tyler Atkinson, the number one linebacker in the country, out of Loganville, Georgia. I need some help on that. Is it Loganville? Logan, Georgia? He goes to Grayson High School in Georgia, and it is in Gwinnett County. Now, Gwinnett County, they call it Yankee County down there. Guys from Gwinnett County more likely to leave the state. We got a couple of guys from Gwinnett County. Kayden McDonald, one of those guys from Gwinnett. I think Edric Houston's from Gwinnett as well. So, and was Seth McLaughlin was as well. So we've got some Gwinnett County dudes, and Atkinson. Clemson, I think, is a real serious team that we need to worry about here, aside from Georgia. But Georgia, probably the front runner. I think Ohio State is second in that list, but I think Clemson's real close too. And while he's got, Auburn on there as well and a couple of others, I think those are the big three. Georgia would have to be the favorite right now. But if James can pull this off, man, it's not going to be a huge shocker because he's been to Ohio State a lot of times. I think it was his 5th trip to Ohio State. He's always talked about how much he likes Ohio State. They've been kind of omnipresent throughout his recruitment. Ryan Day went and visited him immediately after the dead period ended, went down and saw him. So the relationship is strong. You've got the James Laurinaitis factor. You've got the national championship. I think it comes down to the end, and it wouldn't stun me if the Bucks got him. But right now, I'd say the Dogs are still a favorite for him. And then you got Derrek Cooper, who is, outside of Sabian Hyder, Carlos Loughlin's top target on the running back board. Derrek Cooper is an all-around athlete, listed as an athlete. He plays a little bit of everything. And when he's running the ball, he's just a tank. He'll run you over. He's fast as hell. He's built. He's a stud, total stud. Goes to Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida. Of course, Kenyatta and Jeremiah Smith's high school. So there's a connection there. Mom really seems to love Coach Locke, and he's really tight with his mom. And he was committed to Georgia at one point. Now, it doesn't often happen that someone decommits from a school and then ends up recommitting there. But thought right now to be a Georgia, Miami, Ohio State battle. And Georgia, by a lot of people, think they're still the leader, even though he decommitted from them earlier. Ultimately, who knows? But like Tyler Atkinson, Georgia's still in the lead right now, according to most folks who are close to him. I'm not. I've never spoken to Derrek at all. Favor Akey was back in town again, and Favor will not make his decision till after his official visit, and that'll be June 6th. So Favor playing the long game here. This was his 4th visit to Ohio State since he got his dream offer to Ohio State. Miami also on the list there for him. Went and visited them once. Doesn't have anything scheduled right now to go back to Miami. So I think it's pretty clear where Favor's going to end up. So as far as guys that I think are going to be in this class, J.J. Perez from Glenville and Favor Akey, I think are pretty well locks to be in this class right now. All right, let's move to wide receiver as we got another visit for the spring game from our guy, Kayden Dixon Wyatt. Kayden Dixon Wyatt, Chris Henry Jr.'s teammate out at Mater Dei. And Kayden Dixon Wyatt was just in town a couple of weeks ago. So he comes a couple of weeks ago. While he's in town, this has been thought for a while to be a Bucks and Ducks battle here. So Bucks, Ducks, he's in town. Somebody in his inner circle leaks to somebody that Ohio State has the upper hand right now. And then the following weekend, he and another wide receiver target of ours, Messiah Hampton from New York, both go out to Oregon. And then Kayden Dixon Wyatt comes back in town for the spring game. So he's been at Ohio State 2 of the last 3 weekends, and it looks like things are moving in the right direction here with Kayden Dixon Wyatt, which, if he ends up a Buckeye, you have now shattered the Mater Dei curse. The Mater Dei curse, which is Ohio State recruiting guys from this one particular high school, chock full of talent, and they can never get them. It's now turned into an Oregon pipeline, used to be a USC pipeline. You would now get Chris Henry Jr. and Kayden Dixon Wyatt. Curse is over. We're open for business at Mater Dei. So hoping for that. But Kayden Dixon Wyatt, a really good wide receiver who, a lot of different opinions on him. He's a 3-star at one service. He's a top 100 player at another service. I find him to be closer to a top 100 player. And he kind of reminds you of like a Phillip Bell, kind of a do-it-all kind of guy, a lot of polish, can make some crazy catches, not really great at any one thing. But somebody that very well could be in this class with Chris Henry Jr. and hometown Jaden Ricketts, who's an absolute burner and going to get nothing but better. And then you've got Brock Boyd, who didn't come up for a visit, but I think Brock Boyd, who is a TCU commit right now, plays down at Southlake in Texas, is very likely to be in this class. So those two, Messiah Hampton out of New York, Braden Robinson, another kid out of Texas, a couple of wide receivers that there's a lot of positive momentum with. Now, out of all of them, I would prefer Messiah Hampton myself, just because I think he's just an insane dynamic athlete. And a lot of people, I think, undervalue guys when they play in New York because the competition isn't the best. But this kid is something special. So that's what we got on wide receivers. Moving on to the class of 2027, a couple offers did go out. 1-2 guys in town. Justin Weeks, who is a 5-star defensive end. One of these prototypical new age edge rushers, 6'5", long-limbed. He's excellent. Ranked number 6 in the country via 247. And David Gabriel George. David Gabriel George is another one of these kids who's from Canada, and they've got this little pipeline going down to this school in Tennessee. Max LeBlanc came from this school in Tennessee. I forget the name of the school. Then last year, we were after their running back, who ended up going to Ole Miss, but he also was from Canada, goes down to this school in Tennessee. And now this year, another Canadian kid goes down to this school, David Gabriel George. And I've not watched his film yet, but now that he's got this offer and it looks like he's at the top of the Buckeyes board, we'll cue that up and we'll watch that this week sometime. Braylon Womack, superstar safety, number 1 safety in the country, has announced that he is going to be making his decision on August 23rd. That'll be live on 247. So, of course, whenever, if you hear somebody's making a decision and the Buckeyes are in on them, we go live for those and we either celebrate or we piss and moan about it together here on the show. That's what we do. So whenever you hear that, August 23rd, of course, will be one of those days that we are, it's a meeting at Juckeyes Studios with all of us for the decision. All right. I think that's all I want to go over today as far as recruiting. And now let's get to the man, our guy, Dillon Davis from the Delaware Gazette. Wait, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Peyton Falzone, one of the quarterbacks that the Buckeyes in this new kind of trio of quarterbacks that they were looking at for the class of 2026. And that is Jet Tamala from Nebraska. He's the 6'5" one. Then you got Derek Zammit from DePaul Catholic. That's Des Jones and Deshaun Stewart, freshman at Ohio State, their quarterback. And he is down to Alabama and Mississippi State, et cetera. He's about 6'1". And then you got Peyton Falzone out of Nazareth, Pennsylvania, who is a guy that Brad Mandler, the best quarterback coach in the Midwest, said has an arm like Drew Aller, but an insane athlete. And the measurables check out his testing numbers for that athleticism. He has committed to Penn State, so he's officially off the board. So no Peyton Falzone as the Buckeyes continue to try to find their quarterback in the class of 2026. Now here's Dillon. And joining us again, my good buddy Dillon Davis from the Delaware Gazette. Dillon, you don't have any Red Sox gear on. You got some Celtics gear on tonight.
Yeah, no, you're not going to be catching me in any Red Sox stuff for a little while now. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form excited about that baseball team, but it's playoff basketball time now. I'm certainly excited about the Celtics and their opportunity to repeat. I know a lot of Cavs fans are going to be watching this. I hope that we get that matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals, and it looks like that's where we're heading. So we'll see.
That would be amazing. You've got your new microphone. You sound fantastic. Dillon, the Buckeyes are at the White House today. I saw pictures of them. I saw some beat reporters there, and I got people asking me, where's Dillon? Why is he there? I said, he scheduled a show with me tonight, and he said, the president can wait. I got a Juck on Buck show to do.
Yeah, President Trump actually reached out to me directly and asked me if I was going to be making an appearance. And I told him my man Juck's trying to record tonight. And so, I can only be two places at once.
I appreciate that, bro.
He offered to give me the Oval Office to record there after the ceremony, but I turned that down. So.
Yeah, that's a lot of travel. Travel. Yeah. Dillon, I appreciate when people in positions of high power can admit when they're wrong with an initial decision and just go ahead and totally say, yeah, I was wrong about that, and then espouse the virtues of their new decision. Ryan Day going into the spring was going to take it easy, coming off a long season. It wasn't going to look like it used to, nothing like, we're used to around here. We're going to have a spring showcase. The game's not going to look like it used to. And then he's talking about he could use 5 more weeks of spring. And at the end of the spring game, he's telling us how important it is to play 11-on-11 football, because in basketball and baseball, they get so many games. In football, true 11-on-11, you get 12, 13 games a year. Like, he's talking about it like this is a conviction he's had forever. I thought it was awesome. I love that he pivoted. I love that it worked out, that he loved it. I thought it was a great event. And I wish that they wouldn't have billed it as the spring showcase and we'd have packed the place again. But all in all, man, super positive experience coming out of there for me.
Yeah, without question. And, I understood in the beginning what he was trying to do, and in terms of just trying to, kind of be cautious about how they approach this, given how much football they just played. And it made total sense. We didn't want to hear that as fans, as people that, want to try to soak up whatever we can this spring about what this team's going to look like come August. But I understood it. But without a doubt, it certainly turned out to be the best thing for them to get in as much football as they could, given how young they are and experienced they are in so many positions. You're right about the showcase thing, that I have to believe that was a big reason why there were only 40,000 people there. Certainly cost them on that front, but by and large, it was a successful spring. They made it out of the game healthy, which is always priority number one. Got some guys some great experience just in a setting inside the Horseshoe with a decent amount of people in the stadium. So yeah, it was a great success, great event, and it sounds like by all accounts, or almost by all accounts, Ohio State comes out of the spring in a really good spot.
When we talk about that experience and working through things, I was so excited to see Tavian get the reps that he got, being able to kind of fight through a rough start with a couple of mistakes to finish on such a high note, and seeing him out there, man, I mean, you just saw all the talent on display. The couple of mistakes he made, that's just like easy time fixing things. And when we look back at last year's spring game, to Julian and Air, like Tavian looks leaps and bounds ahead of where they were to me. But I thought it was just awesome to see, like, that's the future, and man, it looks bright.
Yeah, without question. I mean, look, Tavian was probably a little juiced up to start out there. I mean, nerves were probably flying. You can tell that much. When he settled down, man, he looked really good. I thought the last couple of drives that he had, or drive and a half, they kind of just gave him another drive at the end of that to, see what they could do. Around the 20, 30-yard line. But in general, the way he closed that game was so encouraging. And look, when you watch Tavian, the physical athlete, the quarterback that he is, you see that he checks all the boxes already. Like, he's going to be a stud in that front if he can just get the, the things that come with playing the position and over time, the processing and reading and things like that. And I certainly trust Brian to do that. So what we saw on Saturday from him from a physical standpoint, there's a ton to be encouraged about, and think that they absolutely have a quarterback of the future who has a chance to be one of the better ones in college football and be a high draft pick. Loved what I saw out of Tavian, and not just the physical part of it too. The fact that he did settle down, like, there was no guarantee that he had to ever settle down, and he did. He got himself composed and started to make some plays, which is encouraging as well for a guy who should still be in high school right now. Let's not forget that he should still be in high school right now. I know the joke, getting ready for prom, but it's true. He should be getting ready for his senior prom right now. Instead, he's trying to, stay afloat in the quarterback room at the Ohio State University. So it was definitely great to see him settle down as well. And, when you talk to Tavian, we've only gotten one chance to talk to him, but I've had a chance to talk to him before then as well. You can see that he kind of just oozes confidence and composure. Like, he's a very well put together kid for his age, not just the athlete that he is, but he's very well spoken. He seems like he's always in control. So I wasn't surprised by that either. Not surprised that he came out and was a little bit antsy and made some mistakes, and wasn't surprised at all that he settled down and really showcased why he was one of the best quarterback prospects in the country. So definitely a lot to love there.
Last time we talked, we were talking about I was voicing to you somewhat my concern that we had not heard just one single time coming out of the spring that Julian ripped it up. Julian was awesome today. Julian was on point. And I just wanted to hear it, see it one time. What was your takeaway from Julian's performance?
I mean, it was about as good as you could hope for. There were still, obviously there's still a lot of growth to go there, and you would hope that that's going to happen over the summer and into fall camp. But I think it was everything you hope for, given the narratives that were coming out, the things that we saw in the Woody, from Julian, just a lot of, a lot of, oh, that was good. And then followed by some things like you can't have that. So it was about as good as you could hope for from Julian from that standpoint to give you a little bit of momentum coming out of the spring. How much that's worth, I don't know. We'll find out. I would hope, ideally, and I know Ryan's hoping this as well, Billy Fessler's hoping this as well, that performance on Saturday would springboard him into an early decision being made in camp. So, it's kind of like now we look not just the decision that's going to be made in camp, but when does it get made? Because if Julian had the performance that he did on Saturday, and then you go into camp and it's only, a week or week and a half into camp and Ryan's ready to make that decision, that tells me that like Julian really used what he accomplished in that spring game and kind of took off with that position. So it'll be interesting to see that there. But I think just coming out of the spring game for what it was, the opportunity that was in front of him, to your point, just getting something going to have some momentum. I'm sure it felt great for Julian to do that and feel like he really put, a big step forward in winning that job. And it was good for, the program and for all of us as well to see that, like, hey, as a reminder that Julian's, he's still really talented. He still has a lot of arm talent there. And it's just a matter of consistency. And he certainly delivered that on Saturday. So encouraging is about the only word. Again, it's only worth what he does with it from now to camp. And like I said, I think, it'll say a lot how early or when that decision gets made in camp, because if it lingers into, later camp and they have to make a decision, obviously with the Texas game coming up, that's not going to be very encouraging. Vice versa. On the other hand, if they make an early decision, that tells me Julian really used that spring game and kind of ran away with that job. So that's what we're hoping for. Not from a Julian standpoint, just from a quarterback taking a hold of the job.
From the Buckeye fan perspective, buddy, I just needed to see that. It was exactly what I needed to see, because now I can picture it. I know what that offense looks like with him. I know what he looks like in the uniform out there cutting it loose. He looked in command. He looked accurate. He was making good decisions. The offense just looked good with, and granted, yeah, it was set up for the offense to look good, and but you still got to make the plays, and he did. And he even put some balls out there where only his guy could make the catch, and it would have been a couple of times two of them to Mylan Graham that would have been great catches. They were contested, but the ball was placed perfectly, and that's what he brings to the table. But if you asked me at the beginning of the spring, before I kind of started getting frustrated, we hadn't heard anything good come out of spring. If you asked me heading into the spring, what do you think Julian's spring game will look like? I would have thought it looked something like what we saw, just based on what my previous notion and hopes for what I thought who he is as a quarterback. I thought it would have looked very similar to that. I was really happy. On the flip side, I think if you had asked me what Lincoln's will look like, it would have looked kind of like what he showed, which is a guy who flashes some big playability here and there. Not the most accurate guy. Maybe doesn't look quite as settled as a quarterback to me, or as smooth, maybe a little more rushed, but a great athlete when he pulls the ball and out of that option and takes off. Like, you can see, if you wanted to tailor an offense around this guy, I think you could make it successful.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I kind of talked about in the past with you about, if Chip Kelly would have stayed at Ohio State, and that was kind of the model for what you wanted to pursue with this next quarterback. There's a lot of, things you see with Lincoln that says like, oh yeah, that's the kind of guy that you would want to, to plug into that offense and try to, generate somewhat of what you got last year. I don't think that's the case at all. And we know is Ryan Day is going to tailor that offense to whoever gives him the best chance to win. And I think as of right now, we probably mostly agree that Julian's that guy throwing the football and getting back to what we, once knew as Ryan Day's offense.
Right.
That guy is going to, spread the football around early and often. And Lincoln had his moments. There were, like you said, there were some times where, like, okay, hey, there's what we've heard from Ryan Day all spring, that like consistency's not there, but there, some good things happen and some bad things happen. So I think overall, I think Ryan Day feels really good coming out of the spring game about his quarterback room in general. Again, there's still a lot to do there over the summer and going into fall camp. But I think what he saw from all three of them on Saturday gives him a lot to like. If Julian is going to start to take that step forward, then obviously that's priority number one. And then Lincoln showed some things as well to say, like, you're in a decent spot behind Julian as well. And that's, I'm not to say that this race is over, or that Julian has all but won it, but if it continues to trend that way coming out of the spring, then I think Ryan Day just feels good about where he's at in general about that quarterback room, with understanding that Tavian behind both of those guys is going to get some valuable learning experience while being an immensely talented guy. So I liked what I saw from all three of the quarterbacks in general, just given what we've heard. And also, we sit here and we talk about these quarterbacks, and I've been in the Woody a few times, so I've gotten to see him a little bit. But compared to what Ryan sees on a daily basis, practice after practice, that's I have a very small snapshot of what the quarterbacks did this spring. So for all I know, Julian's had these moments before, and Ryan's not going to come out in the next press conference and just wax poetic about Julian and the performance he had in practice a couple of days ago. So maybe this has happened a little bit, and Ryan's just doing what, of course, he's going to do. But just from what we had seen, it was great to see Julian do what he did, and still have a reminder that Lincoln, there's a lot to like about Lincoln if you had to play him. And ultimately, look, I guess I'm talking about Julian springboarding, using this as a springboard into the fall. If on the other side, if Lincoln comes back and somehow ultimately wins this job, it's going to say a lot about Lincoln and what he's done from the spring on as well. And having seen the flashes that we saw in the spring game, if the consistency comes around and that ultimately gets him the job, then I guess there's still a lot to like there as well. So I'm a lot more encouraged about the quarterback spot than I was a week ago, without question.
Speaking to what you said there, going back to, what we've known to be the Ryan Day offense, something that's not really ever been a staple of that offense is utilizing the tight end much, which I've always been a big proponent of it, because I get so irritated when I see inferior teams just pick up first down after first down, burning us with a tight end. And boy, they use the tight ends a lot in the passing game. Obviously, Max Clare looks like who we thought he was. We could see that, at Purdue. But Nate Roberts physically looks very, very ready to go. He looked really good. Didn't even get to see any Christian Bennett or Will Kazmarek, but that room, we've talked about how loaded it is. I feel like that's going to be a part of this offense moving forward. I don't want to take too much out of it, but you kind of got to get those guys involved now with all that talent.
Well, it certainly better be a legitimate component of that offense. I think, we would all agree on that. Look, Max Clare gives Ohio State something we don't think we've ever seen at Ohio State out of a tight end. It's so tantalizing to think about what an offense could look like with that much talent on the outside, and to think about what Max Clare could do inside of that is just I really hope that comes to fruition, because again, I just don't think Ohio State's ever had a piece like this before. I thought they might have something similar in Jeremy Rucker, and it just never materialized. And I don't even think that was all Jeremy Rucker, but I think he had that skill set, and it just never really, was a focal point of the offense. But so I'm really excited about that. And you're right about Nate Roberts, that he was probably one of my bigger standouts in terms of like things I didn't know I was looking at or didn't think I would come away from the spring talking about, and looked really good. So, and that room's loaded. I think I told somebody last week, talking to him, that like, this is the most talented Ohio State tight end room we've ever seen. It is. And I never really even considered Nate Roberts being a factor in that. And then he goes out and has a really nice spring with some guys not playing. So it's in a great spot, but make no mistake about it. I don't know how this looks, because the way Will Kazmarek and Bennett Christian played last year, Jelani got some time as well. How did that all shake out? I don't know. I don't envy Keenan Bailey for trying to have to figure that out. But make no mistake about it, like, Max Clare has to be on the field a lot for this offense, especially with a young and experienced quarterback, because that could be such a big boost for these guys. So yeah, just excited as I'll get out for Max Clare especially, but the tight ends in general, because it's going to be a real asset for Ohio State.
I think Keenan Bailey has done maybe the best quiet, wonderful turnaround we've ever seen, that doesn't get talked about enough. What he's done to that room in such a short amount of time, and not just loading it with talent, but the attitudes that they all have, like what he brings to that room, it just works. He just does. And they follow his lead. They went from the least talented room, and that was their mantra. We're going to be the toughest. Okay. Now we're loaded. We're going to be the leaders. And it seems like they're taking that on with Bennett and Will, and Jelani even taking on more. He seems like he's, maturing a bit into that role. He looked pretty good, but I'm just so impressed by Keenan Bailey. We started talking probably early last spring about just how dynamic we thought Mylan Graham could be, and we just got to finally see it for the first time. And wow, was it something special to watch. After the game, Ryan Day kind of gave us a little insight behind the scenes that I hadn't heard much about. I don't know if you'd heard anything about it, but him having issues finishing, securing the ball. And then later on that evening, Emily sent me that Heartline blasted him on Instagram, a still shot of him on that long touchdown run with the ball like way out here. He's like, yo, 5, that ball security is crazy. But no, didn't know that. But wow, for a young guy, I mean, and you could just see that how much he can still mature and get better. That is one dynamic dude, man.
Yeah. I told you this before. I'm going to start, like, if I can find a way to monetize making player comparisons, like from the day they get to Ohio State, I'm going to try to find a way to do that, because I've been nailing these things. And I saw so many people talking about it coming out of the spring, but very early on when he got to Ohio State and getting a chance to see him early in camp and things like that, I mean, he just screamed Garrett Wilson to me. And sure enough, that was the big talk coming out of Saturday, was that, like, that's Garrett Wilson 2.0. He looks like, he's that kind of athlete, similar size as well. Maybe it's part of the number that he wears, but just seems like he's a total package. Yeah. He has the ability to run away from guys. He has a great catch radius, and he's quick, and he's an advanced route runner already as well. And he's still, I mean, this was his first spring practice, so which is easy to forget. We talked about the tight end room, and I don't know how they get some of those guys, time on the field. I don't know where Mylan ultimately falls or shakes in this offense and the ability to get targets. But he seems like a guy who you can't keep him off the field. And what that looks like, I know that's a situation Brian Hartline's all too familiar with the talent that he just keeps on churning through there. But that seems like a guy that you can't keep off the field. I don't know what that looks like, because they have 3 guys in front of him you can't keep off the field, really, especially if we think Brandon Ennis is going to be what he's going to be. So I don't know what that looks like ultimately, but Mylan Graham's the truth. Not surprising at all. Like you said, we've been talking about this going back to last year. I made the comment that I actually thought Mylan would have some kind of trajectory where he would end up being a factor last year in the offense. That by the time he got a chance to be there and settle in and learn the offense, that he would eventually find a way onto the field as a true freshman, because I thought that much of him. That didn't play out like that. But going into this season, I don't know how you keep him off the field, but then at the same time, I don't know how you get him on the field as well. So that's going to be really interesting to see. But make no mistake about it, I'm sure we'll talk about Quincy Porter as well. But Ohio State's receiver room, if there was any doubt about it, which I don't think there was, it's in as good a spot as it could possibly be. It's in as good a spot as it's been for years now.
Yep.
And the next wave is right there. Not right there. The next wave has already arrived. It's just a matter of when they get their opportunity to go do it, because Quincy Porter, Mylan Graham, guys like that are already. And we're talking, I mean, like Bryson Rogers is a great talent as well. We haven't.
That's what I'm saying. He's with the old guys, right?
Yeah,
but he's like right stuck in the middle between the guys that are established and the young guys that are ready to blow. And here you got this awesome talent here that hasn't even yet gotten his shot.
Right.
And I appreciate my buddy Dillon, as always. We're going to end it right there today. We'll pick up on that conversation tomorrow. I'll lead in like I did today with kind of the show, and then finish off with the conversation just like we did here today. Seemed to work well last week, and everybody liked it like that. A little bit of just the show, and then a little bit of my guest, which I'm going to call Chris. Maybe we'll have Chris on. We haven't talked to Chris in a while. We'll probably do a show with Chris here this week as well. So appreciate you guys. Please do like the show, and please subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for all your support. Juck and Bucks out.